Hello and welcome to the Thursday Night Football NFL DFS slate breakdown for the showdown. We got a good matchup tonight. The Eagles versus the Vikings. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to go through and break down everything. We'll start off with some ownership and then go through position by position to give some takes on each players and you know, how to maybe combat everybody else in the field to take down some GPPs tonight. All right, now before we get into it, if you have not already, come join us at LionStar. There is no better time to get involved and join the community than now. We got football going now. In another month, we got basketball. Hockey's right around the corner. It is the best time for sports. There's also MLB playoffs right there, so a lot of good stuff to consider joining right now. That $39.99 does cover all of your DFS as well as props AI for all of the sports we cover. It's a great deal, best deal in the industry. Come join us. Let's go. All right. Now let's get into the fun of this slate. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting one. I'm going to start with going over the lineups a little bit. And the real big news that is different than last week is that Kenneth Gainwell is likely to be out versus the Vikings tonight. That's going to give us a big change up at running back for the Eagles and some nice kind of options to consider. Look, the Eagles have a very good offensive line, so they should be able to run the ball a little bit here. And we have three capable backs, and we really don't know which one of them it's going to be. DeAndre Swift was the one that played the most last week, but he didn't get that much love and was only had 2 targets and 1 rush. Meanwhile, Rashad Penny, healthy inactive. So he just didn't play. They didn't want him with the team. And then Boston Scott was there and did not play too much. He, like Swift, 1 carry in 1 reception. So it's a very interesting situation we have here. We really don't know who is going to get the bulk of the carries. With that information, I'm likely to use ownership as my guide as far as who to play. Now, I think Rashad Penny is the best runner. Boston Scott is the second best runner, but DeAndre Swift by far is the best pass catcher. So I think all of them will or possibly have their roles. Now, Penny may be the best runner, or at least in my mind. He may not be in Philly's mind, as Penny was inactive and Scott was playing last week. So we have a lot of information here to decipher. Not really sure which way to go there, but it is an interesting spot that we do need to take consideration of and use that in making our lineups. All right. Now, the game totals 49, 6.5 point favorites for the Eagles. And with that, it does look like ownership is favoring the Eagles tonight. So if we see most of the top owned flex players, not including quarterbacks, are all Eagles. Look, the highest owned player on this slate by far is going to be Jalen Hurts. He's also going to be the highest owned captain. Cousins, because he's a quarterback, will be high owned also. I took them out of it because that's kind of just how it always is for quarterbacks. What I want to see is where the field are going position player wise, and the Eagles are definitely the higher owned team, just like the Chiefs were last week. And what did we say? You know, it would make some sense to have a little more Detroit ownership just because that gets you different. We're in the same situation here. Look, the Vikings very well could be passing most of this game and able to rack up some fantasy points because of that. If they're able to keep this game close, they should be able to get enough fantasy points, you know, to warrant having them. They also have some very exciting weapons, a lot of different ways to go. So I do like having a little more Vikings in my lineup just because that is able to get us different. Now, ownership wise, Swift is where everybody's going for the Eagles. He is definitely the best pass catcher, but he may not be the best runner, and he's definitely not the best runner through the tackles that is going to go to Penny or Boston Scott. So, in a game script where Philadelphia may not really have to pass much to the running backs, and Jalen Hurts isn't a great passer in the check down to running backs, I don't really like playing too much Swift at this ownership. I think it's pretty wise and pretty sharp to maybe go to a Penny or a Boston Scott, at some lower prices and get a little different with those guys. So I think it's a very interesting spot as far as the running back. And we're going to break down the matchup tools here as well, but that is after we'll finish through the ownership. Wide receiver wise, obviously Justin Jefferson is the highest owned. He is super expensive, but he's Justin Jefferson, always worthy, and he can break the slate on any given day. I mean, he had a huge game last week and didn't even get a touchdown, 27 points on just receptions and yards, and he can do that, week in, week out. Devontae Smith is very interesting. A.J. Brown is probably going to be covered by... they're probably going to be featuring and trying to stop A.J. Brown a little more than Smith. And the underneath stuff may be open for Smith. So I like it. However, because the new Vikings defense is going to be pressure, there is a potential for A.J. Brown to get open deep. A little bit more than there has been in the years prior versus Minnesota. I love A.J. Brown's deep threat ability in this game. And the fact that he's going lower owned than Devonta Smith is very, very interesting to me. Now, they're both very similar owned, so I wouldn't say ownership is the reason to go to one guy or the other. But they both have very similar ceilings. Smith is just a little bit cheaper. One thing we got to bring up here is KJ Osborne actually played way more snaps than Jordan Addison last week. Now, Jordan Addison is probably going to play, a few more snaps every single week just because he is an exciting young rookie. But to start this year might be a little slow. But I do think KJ Osborne and Addison should both be a consideration in your lineups, as this team may have to pass a lot. And if that's the case, those two guys could get some work at low ownership, as could Quez Watkins, but I don't like him as much just because I do expect Philadelphia to maybe be in the lead. Tight end wise, I think both Goddard and Hawkinson look good. The one thing I do have to say, with any showdown slate, the tight ends are always interesting, especially the backup ones, because they could just catch that random touchdown for $200 and be in that optimal lineup. So do consider them. Eagles, I think you got to consider the Eagles defense a little bit here, especially if you're going with more of an onslaught, say Eagles dominate the game type thing like we saw with the Cowboys. Eagles D is very interesting. That D-line is extremely good, and they can get some picks. Also, anytime you have a game total this high, the kickers are very interesting. And they're probably going a little under-owned here. I do think both our ownerships probably are around 10 to 15%, not 8-1, but we will see a little bit later as that changes throughout the day, as I'm sure it will. Overall, with ownership, look, more people are going to own Philly than the Vikings, and that's the big takeaway here. And as far as how to get different, as far as ownership wise, the only one I'm really considering fading is DeAndre Swift at this point, just because there are so many questions in the air and we don't know there. All right, so let's go to the matchups here. Cousins is in a decent spot. Absolutely. Mac Jones was able to do very, very well last week versus this Eagles D. They're going to have to pass a lot. So I do like Cousins. And I think some of this underneath stuff is going to be open, say, for Jordan Addison or KJ Osborne or Justin Jefferson and especially Hawkinson. So I like the tight ends. I like Kirk Cousins. I think he is extremely interesting. The Eagles gave Baker Mayfield, the Vikings gave Baker Mayfield some trouble. I don't think they're giving Jalen Hurts that much trouble. I think Jalen Hurts is going to be just fine, and he should be the highest owned guy and highest owned captain just because of his rushing upside. All right, running back situation. This is the one that is very, very interesting here. So Swift, Penny, and Scott all need to have consideration. Now, I don't know if I would play more than two of them in a lineup, and I definitely would not play Penny and Scott in a lineup together. I think most likely one of them is going to have, the rushing workload, while the other is just, say, the third string backup guy, maybe get a little bit of work, 10% of the snaps or something like that, but won't get enough to really be meaningful. DeAndre Swift is going to have the pass catching role. He's likely the third down guy. If they're down, he'll play a little bit more. I don't love his outlook in this game. I think people do think he's going to carry the load, but I just don't think that's how the Eagles view him, judging by how he, his workload last week and, what they have seen of him. So I think he may be going a little too high owned, but he 100% has the ability to break this slate, especially at his price. So he is worthy consideration and likely worthy of that 70% as he was, playing the second most snaps for the Eagles last week. So it tends to lead that he will probably be doing it this week. But the big unknown factor, we don't know what the Eagles are going to do there. On the other side of the ball, look, Madison is the guy. He played 73% of the snaps, should get plenty of snaps again this week. Stevenson was able to get to the Eagles through that passing game, and that's probably how Madison is going to have to be scoring points. I don't think he's going to be, an elite rusher versus this very good Eagles front line, but he could. I think Madison deserves some thought. I don't really love him, but running backs very easily can get, have, say, Justin Jefferson fall down at the 1 yard line. Madison rushes it in. So they do have very many pass to a touchdown, which, receivers just don't quite have as many pass. So I think Madison is interesting. Chandler did play a little bit. Not really in consideration for me this week. All right. Wide receiver, Addison is very interesting. As you can see, also, Philly has got beat up a little bit from the second and third wide receivers. So Addison is definitely in consideration. He's probably going to be able to run a lot of underneath routes, which, will help keep some pressure off Cousins, keep him upright, and keep him throwing. I think you have to consider Addison, especially with where his ownership is at. One thing is that KJ Osborne likely plays more snaps. Is KJ Osborne as good as Addison? No, but we have seen some huge blow-up games out of Addison, towards the end of the year last year, and so he absolutely should be out of Osborne, so he needs to be in consideration. I really like, using the two second, third wide receivers in these showdown games because they go so under-owned, and once the game starts, they have just as good of a chance as the studs to get it done. Obviously, the studs get all the attention, and so second or third guys can get it done just with less secondary attention at them. So I like both those guys. On the Eagles side, look, I really like A.J. Brown this game. I know Ryan Humphries favors Devontae Smith, but that just goes to show you that both guys are very, very viable in this route. Smith has a higher floor and almost as high as a ceiling as Brown, and he's a little more consistent, whereas Brown is a more volatile player. His ceiling is real high, but his floor can also be low where he can kind of disappear a little bit. But with this team and with how the Vikings are bringing pressure and making the corners, go one-on-one or with a single high safety, I think Brown getting deep is a very, very real possibility in this game, and that's why I like A.J. Brown, and I definitely would consider him as a captain. Really, both of those wide receivers I would consider for captain, as well as Addison. Tight end, I really, really like TJ Hawkinson in this game. I do think that the Eagles are going to make the Vikings check down the ball, giving a lot of work to Hawkinson in a matchup that Hunter Henry just crushed them. 5 receptions for 56 and a touchdown. I think that Hawkinson has a very real possibility at 6-7 receptions, 70-80 yards and a touchdown. And then Dallas Goedert is going to go largely overlooked, but he shouldn't be. He is in a decent spot here versus the Vikings. And he's out there a ton. It's just, does he get the passes? He is absolutely, the third passing option in this on this team. So he is a little bit more of an afterthought, but he is a legit threat, and you should consider them. So all in all, I think this game is going to be very interesting. My favorite captains here are, let's get back to the game here. Favorite captains, obviously you got to consider Jalen Hurts due to his rushing upside. He is in captain consideration. I don't like Kirk Cousins as a captain. I don't like to play pocket passers at captain. I just think that most of the time, if they're going to get there, one of the wide receivers get there before him or score a little bit more at a little cheaper price. Now, Justin Jefferson is more expensive, but that ceiling is giant, so you do have to consider him. However, I do think he might go a little over-owned at captain, and I think he is a little bit expensive. DeAndre Swift, personally, if I am going to play Swift, he will probably be in the captain spot, because I think that at that 70% ownership or whatever, you can cut down that ownership a little bit by having him at the captain, getting more points for him, and it just allows you to differentiate a little bit. However, you guys know I don't love Swift today, but he's a very talented player, so he is worth consideration, and I will have a little bit. I don't mind going Penny or Boston Scott at captain. I think it's a very interesting play that not many will do, so I think that is interesting. And as of note, Eagles wide receivers, I like at captain. If Jalen Hurts does not rush for a touchdown, one of them is very, very viable at the captain spot. Hawkinson, I also think, is a nice captain option. However, for Hawkinson to be a captain, you either need 2 touchdowns or a low-scoring game where he gets in the end zone. So it is a lot less likely that he is your optimal captain. But all in all, I think this game's very interesting, and it should be a good one. It's a high-scoring game. Do with that information what you guys will, and good luck tonight. I'm excited about this game, excited to watch it. You guys have a good one, and I will be back tomorrow with the main slate breakdown. Make sure to comment, subscribe, and like all our videos. Helps us out a ton to give all this information out for free. Bye, guys. Good luck.